My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. President Donald Trump just made some surprising new public statements about the Russia-Ukraine war, and the results were pretty unimpressive. At one point, he seemed to get angry at Vladimir Putin over a massive and deadly new Russian attack on Ukraine, calling on Putin to stop. But then, at another point, Trump seemed to suggest that he's not going to expect Russia to make any concessions of any kind in the quest for peace. That instantly wrecked the illusion Trump is trying to spin that he expects genuine concessions from both sides. We're trying to unravel all of this today with Ben Burgess, a columnist at Jacobin and a podcaster who has a good new piece for MSNBC.com arguing that Trump's strategy for peace in the Russia-Ukraine conflict looks likely to be counterproductive at best. Ben, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So to catch people up, the Trump administration this week started pressuring Ukraine to accept a peace deal that would basically give Russia all the territory it has secured so far, while blocking Ukraine from ever joining NATO. Ukraine, unsurprisingly, has rejected this. Then Russia launched a massive attack on Ukraine that killed at least 12 people, and this prompted Trump to tweet the following, quote, "I am not happy with the Russian strikes on Kyiv. Not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done." Ben, I know Trump really wants to appear as if he's putting pressure on both Russia and Ukraine to make a deal, but does that tweet get the job done? And is there any reason to think Trump's negotiators are putting real pressure on Russia?
Well, I haven't seen any indication that they're particularly serious about any of this. And in fact, I mean, one of the things that really hit me again, kind of hearing that tweet and hearing you talk about it, is that there is this weird assumption that seems to be underlying a lot of what Trump is doing, not just with Russia, Ukraine, but, you know, with a lot of the rest of what they've done in the last few months, that the United States has kind of an unlimited ability to shape what happens everywhere in the rest of the world. And they're just sort of nonplussed when everybody doesn't, you know, fall into line. It's just a very strange and honestly kind of childlike view of geopolitics.
He's just saying Canada would be much better off as a 51st state. So what's the holdup, guys?
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you think, though? Is there any evidence at all that they're actually pressuring Russia in any sense for concessions in this whole thing? I mean, they've already, as we just discussed, put out this proposal that would essentially require Ukraine to concede everything. Are they expecting anything from Russia in the real world here?
Well, I mean, the best defense of them on this point would be who knows what they're saying behind closed doors. Maybe that's where the pressure is happening. But then if that is the case, what's confusing to me is why is only that part being done behind closed doors? I mean, like part of the thing about this peace proposal that they floated is not that, you know, in certain respects that like it would even be shocking if an actual deal that was arrived at in some ways looked like this. It's that it's being presented as an ultimatum before the parties themselves, talk it through. And it just seems like a very strange conception of how diplomacy works.
Yeah, can you explain what you mean by that? In other words, they're really browbeating Zelensky publicly to accept this thing. J.D. Vance went out and he basically said, take this or we'll walk away. Trump is saying very similar things. And you talk about what they're actually saying, what their position is publicly, the browbeating aspect of it.
Really, I mean, if you go back to that bizarre meeting that Trump and Vance and Rubio had with Zelensky at the White House a while back, that I think many people said seemed like Trump thought he was doing a season finale of The Celebrity Apprentice, that this is the big boardroom, scene at the end where you fire somebody. But the problem with that is that Volodymyr Zelensky can't be fired by the United States government, right? Because he's not an employee of the United States. He's a politician in Ukraine, right? An entirely different society with its own local politics that he has to answer to. And again, there just seems to be fundamentally no awareness of this. There seems to be this view that the United States can sort of reshape the rest of the world at will. That we'd really like Greenland, so we'll just figure something out, right? Like one way or the other, we'll figure something out. We'd really like the trade balance to be different, so we'll just impose that on everybody, and everybody will fall into line. And it seems to be much the same thing here. So in this case, they had these proposals, which, according to a report in the Associated Press, were originally floated as, these are just ideas. Right, that was the phrase that was quoted there. Just ideas; these can change, and then they were presented as this very public ultimatum, which is pretty much all of the kind of most painful concessions you can imagine Ukraine agreeing to in peace negotiations, sort of all at once. Right, here's all the territorial stuff. Here's the foreclosed future NATO membership, etc. And again, this seems like very much not like how peace negotiations would typically work, where you're sort of trying to, coax both parties to the table, at the table, there's push and pull, you're trying to get people to make concessions without alienating them so much that they just walk away. And, whatever this is, it's certainly not that.
Well, that brings me to what Trump said to a reporter on Thursday. The master dealmaker was asked by a reporter what concessions Russia is willing to make toward peace. Listen to this.
What concessions has Russia offered up thus far to get to the point where you're closer to peace?
Stopping the war, taking the whole country. Pretty big concession.
So, Ben, I think what Trump just said there is that it would count as a really big concession by Russia if it agrees not to take over the entire country of Ukraine. It seems like this blows up Trump's whole kind of scam posture of wanting to look as if he's pressuring both sides. But to your point, it doesn't make sense as a public strategy, does it? It concedes at the very outset that he's not expecting anything from Russia, which empowers Russia more and reduces the pressure on them, doesn't it? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is really out of sync with observable reality, because the idea that Russia could just take all of Ukraine if it wanted to is something that lots of people believed in January 2022, right? But it's long since been clear that that's not the case. That I think sort of general post-Soviet dysfunction in the Russian state, hollowed out, the military machine to a very great extent. And so the initial attempt to push all the way into Kyiv and impose regime change in 2022, flopped. That didn't work. I mean, it didn't work even before the big infusions of American funds and weapons, which is a crucial point, right? That it's not that they would have been able to do this if not for that. I mean, I'm no military strategist, but it certainly looks like from the basic public facts that that's not the case. Now, it could still be true that American support, has, kept Ukraine, in the game for longer than it would have been otherwise in the last few years. But it's also to the point earlier about how the United States really doesn't have the power to just reshape everything that happens in the world according to its own singular will. There are all these other countries that are also capable of sending Ukraine aid. And, it might not be a full substitute for American aid if that were completely cut off. But I mean, it seems overwhelmingly clear that even if Russia did win eventually, like they got, the best case scenario for them, which would be that they actually slowly ground their way through to invading the entire country, at which point, presumably that would play out much like the American occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan. It's not like the violence would be over as soon as regime change was imposed. That's not how this ever works anywhere, right? But like, even if they got that, it would take them a long time to get it. So I mean, it's not like some Putin could just storm Kyiv tomorrow if he wanted to, but he's generously conceding that he won't do that. I mean, if that were the case, why would Putin bother with negotiations? Russia has really lost a lot in the war. I mean, it's been a very slow grinding effort. They've lost. It's a little bit hard to be sure about the exact numbers of soldiers, because they're not very forthcoming about that. But it seems like they've lost a tremendous number of soldiers. There are lots of Russian men who have fled to other countries because they don't want to fight in the war. There's certainly been an economic hit from it. So it's just not the case that this is something they could do right now, which again is why Russia is willing to engage in peace negotiations. I mean, peace negotiations are something that typically happen when two countries are at war and neither of them can just decisively win on the battlefield. So you're willing to see what can happen at the negotiating table.
Spring is finally here. For us in DC, that means cherry blossom, warmer weather, and more breaking news each and every day. To stay up to date on all the news that you need to know, there's no better place than the DSR Network. And there's no better way to enjoy the DSR Network than to become a member. Members enjoy an ad-free listening experience, access to our Discord community, exclusive content, and more. Use code DSR2025 for a 40% off discount on sign-up at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's code DSR2025 at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
And now, two pigeons bemoaning the fact you can choose the TV you want with DirecTV.
So now they can pick out their favorite entertainment when they sign up and save money?
You mean if you like sports?
You can get a sports pack.
What about entertainment?
Entertainment pack.
It's like finding an old pizza with your favorite toppings, which for me would be pineapple and toenails.
Pineapple?
Pay for the TV you want, not the TV you don't. Genre pack starting at $34.99 a month. Visit DirecTV.com for more information. New residential customers only. Local channels vary by market. Services renew monthly unless you cancel online. Credit card required. Restrictions apply.
You wrote this piece for MSNBC.com saying that while we should all want a diplomatic resolution of the Russia-Ukraine war, the approach that Trump is taking to Zelensky is actually counterproductive if the goal is an actual peace compromise. As you said earlier in this talk, he's treating Zelensky as an employee who's expected to snap into line. And Trump and J.D. Vance browbeating and bullying Zelensky to accept a terrible deal only makes it harder for Zelensky to make any concessions from his side. Can you talk about that element of it?
Yeah, exactly. Look, as distasteful as Trump's way of going about it was, if I thought it was going to end in a peace deal, I think there's an obvious utilitarian case that's a good result, right? It's like, okay, great, all's well that ends well, right? But and to be really clear about this, for whatever it's worth, I'm somebody who's been writing articles and, Jacobin and the Daily Beast, other places for years saying that the United States should push for a, negotiated de-escalation and, some kind of settlement in Ukraine. I think there are all sorts of obvious reasons to want that. That there have been times in the last 3 years when the prospect of a wider war has seemed terrifyingly close. That could be horrible for the entire world. Certainly the immediate, humanitarian consequences of the war have been awful in Ukraine. I also think that, like those sorts of Russian men who've had to like escape into other countries to avoid fighting. I think everybody's sympathies, should be with those people, and their desire not to be fed into the meat grinder. So I think there are many, many reasons to want a negotiated peace settlement. And again, if I thought this was going to get it, then sure, I guess, right? Maybe this would be like the one good thing that Trump does. But I think there's every reason to suspect that it won't work, right? I would love to be wrong, but I don't think it's going to work because the effect of Trump and Vance, as you say, so publicly berating and scolding Zelensky, is that when Zelensky stands up against them, that surely shores up his domestic popularity. I mean, you'd have to not know very much about people not to think that, right? That they've seeing the leader of your country stand up against the 800-pound gorilla in the world, and the sort of bullying from the United States, of course, is going to have that effect. And it seems like, if anything, being sort of given like, here are like all the bitter pills that you might have to swallow in peace negotiations, and I demand that you swallow all of them right up front before you even start talking, is the kind of thing that seems very likely to just harden Ukrainian public opinion against making any kind of concessions for a peace deal.
Well, Ben, doesn't it actually look as if they're trying to do on the kind of global negotiating stage what they did with the ambush in the Oval Office, which is to deliberately try to provoke Zelensky into giving the U.S. some sort of pretext to walk away from the talks? Then they'll blame Zelensky's supposed intransigence for it. I mean, they're already saying Zelensky is being intransigent because he won't accept an awful, awful deal that gives Russia pretty much everything what it wants. So is that what's going on here potentially, that they just want to walk away?
I think it's possible. I mean, I think what there is to be said in favor of that explanation is that it actually makes sense of what they're doing, that the actions would be consistent with the goal. Now, as I said, I think oftentimes with Trump, I suspect that the right analysis is that actually the sort of strange, simplistic explanation is actually the right one, and actually maybe they just are being this counterproductive without any particular strategy. I think that's possible. But look, I do think it's worth lingering on the scenario that you're talking about, because it's really worth sort of circling and underlining how bad that would be. Because if the whole case for what Trump is doing is look at these thousands of Russian and Ukrainian soldiers who are dying every week, look at all of the devastation that's been imposed on Ukraine, look at the sort of dangers of this spilling over into other countries, which has seemed to be a possibility at various times in the last 3 years. And so we just need to end this. Well, look, if the United States did just walk away, and quite likely the result of that would be that other countries in Europe would step up their own weapons shipments. Maybe it wouldn't completely fill the shortfall, but it would go some way towards that goal. Then that's a recipe for the war just dragging on for years and years, which is like, if not the worst possible outcome, certainly one of the worst.
Well, I think what you're getting at there is that there's actually a genuine and deep tension in Trump's position here. And I think Secretary of State Marco Rubio kind of exposed this without maybe meaning to. I want to play some audio from Rubio, who's been trying to negotiate this peace. Here's what he told reporters on Thursday.
But what happened last night with those missile strikes should remind everybody of why this war needs to end. It's horrible those missiles landed. What's even worse is there are today people that were alive yesterday that are not alive today, because this war continues, and the president wants to stop it. And everyone should be thanking the president for being a peacemaker and trying to save lives.
So for Rubio, the most important thing here is that we're all thankful for Trump's good intentions. Ben, it seems to me that this gets at this tension I'm talking about. On the one hand, he really seems to want to walk away from this whole thing and blame Ukraine for it, for all the reasons we've gone through. But on the other, he genuinely wants to be seen as the greatest deal maker in human history or whatever. What do you make of that tension? Which one weighs more heavily in the end?
I mean, look, I think it's entirely possible that it just depends who the last person is who talks to him. the day that he takes a decisive turn on this. I expect that both of those considerations are probably going to be a big deal for him. I don't think I'm breaking any new ground when I say that the man is fairly unpredictable, right? That there's some chaos here in his decision-making processes. So, it could go either way. But I mean, what really hits me about that clip is just that this just sounds to me like something that somebody would say when they were sitting next to the great leader of some tin pot authoritarian regime. It's like, oh, first I really want to say that we all need to praise the wisdom and benevolence of the leader. It's just degrading.
Yeah, and so what does that mean for the situation we're in here? He needs to come out of this looking like the most brilliant deal maker in human history. So how can he just walk away from it?
I mean, I think, again, he would like to be seen as a great deal maker, but I don't think that means that he'll necessarily make a deal in any given case. I mean, look, this is the same president who tore up Obama's nuclear detente with Iran in his first term. I mean, just recently, he kind of shrugged at the end of the ceasefire in Israel-Palestine that had been sort of seen as a great accomplishment, coming in. So I think it's the idea that, Trump, would have results that objectively show that he's not in fact a great deal maker, but he would just kind of find ways to spin that, right? I mean, like doesn't seem particularly shocking to me, right? So I think that there is, I think that there is a very bad outcome here that's entirely possible where, again, rather than actually, ending the war, which I would really, really like to happen, right? Like that would be amazing if there was actually a peace settlement where instead the effect is that it just drags on for the unpredictable future just without the United States. And maybe Trump would spin that as look, I ended the war, by which he means I ended our involvement with the war, even though the war continues to be ongoing. Or again, I really think that a lot of people who sort of agree with me, agree with Trump, I guess, right? That it would be really good to have, a negotiated resolution to bring an end to the war. I think some people who have that position might not quite have wrapped their heads around how bad it would be if the way that the war ended, right, was that Russia just sort of slowly won over the course of the next few years, because one, that's a few more years of war, and two, even if they won nominally, right, that they were somehow able to grind through and get the other 80% of Ukrainian territory that they don't have right now. Right now, I think it's 18 point something percent. Even if they somehow did, accomplish that, which they haven't been able to in the last 3 years. I mean, I think people's memories are very short if they think that means that there's going to be no more violence and killing in Ukraine. I mean, that would just mean a sort of inevitable long, bloody war of counterinsurgency. I mean, this is sort of a very simple-minded point, but that doesn't sound like peace to me.
And it doesn't seem like Trump is at all equipped to bring about some kind of different outcome. Ben Burgess, thanks so much for coming on with us, man. It was really good to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
On May 14th, the New Republic's editor, Michael Tomasky, and staff writers Matt Ford, Timothy Noah, Tori Otten, and myself will host the next in our series, America in Crisis. With the new administration in place, this event will bring together influential political commentators with TNR's most engaged readers to explore what we can do to fight back against Trump's anti-democratic rampage. Join us on May 14th. You can register at atlasarts.org/events/TNR. Thanks so much. You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler and the DSR Network.